Israel has launched air raids on Syria, killing 3 soldiers and wounding another in what the Israeli army called a retaliatory attack after it allegedly found explosive devices along its northern border. In a statement on Wednesday, the Israeli military said its fighter jet hit military targets belonging to the Iranian Quds Force and the Syrian armed forces in the overnight strikes. The targets included storage facilities, headquarters, and military compounds, as well as Syrian surface-to-air missile batteries. The Syrian state news agency SANA reported that 3 military personnel were killed and 1 was wounded in the Israeli aggression. President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday approved the creation of a Russian naval facility in Sudan capable of mooring nuclear-powered surface vessels, clearing the way for Moscow's first substantial military foothold in Africa since the Soviet fall. The new facility, earmarked to be built in the vicinity of Port Sudan, will be capable of accommodating up to 300 military and civilian personnel and improve Russia's ability to operate in the Indian Ocean, expanding its influence in Africa. President Putin presided over a flagship Russia-Africa summit last year, an event designated to increase Russian sway on the continent, and 2 nuclear-capable Russian bombers landed in South Africa at the same time in a show of intent. Ethiopian forces pushed towards the capital of the rebel Tigray region on Wednesday, ignoring international appeals for talks to end the conflict and denying it was targeting any ethnic group. Federal troops are locked in a 2-week conflict against Tigray's forces, which has killed hundreds on both sides, rocked the Horn of Africa, stirred ethnic factions elsewhere in Ethiopia, and sent 30,000 refugees fleeing into Sudan. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has billed the offensive as a campaign to restore rule of law in the northern state of more than 5 million people, saying victory would come in days. He launched the offensive on November 4th after accusing Tigrayan forces of an attack on the government base in the region. President Donald Trump on Wednesday fired top cybersecurity official Chris Krebs in a message on Twitter, accusing him, without evidence, of making a highly inaccurate statement affirming the November 3rd election was secure and rejecting claims of fraud. President Trump has made debunked allegations about the election was rigged and has refused to concede defeat to President-elect Joe Biden. His campaign has filed a flurry of lawsuits in battleground states, although election officials in both parties have said they see no evidence of serious irregularities. Krebs' work in protecting the election from hackers and combating disinformation about the vote won praise from lawmakers of both parties, as well as state and election officials around the country. 3 former lawmakers from Hong Kong's pro-democracy opposition were arrested Wednesday for protests held earlier this year in the city's legislature as it passed a law criminalizing insults to China's national anthem. Police confirmed that the 3 men were arrested for contempt and for administering noxious substance with intent to injure, aggrieve, or annoy. The later charge refers to the trio throwing a rotten plant and a foul-smelling fertilizer in the chamber as a way to disrupt 2 debating sessions on the anthem law, which was ultimately passed. According to the police, 5 people, some of them police, were killed and more than 10 injured Wednesday when an Shabab suicide bomber attacked a restaurant in the Somali capital of Mogadishu. The officer and witnesses said the attacker walked into the restaurant near a police academy and blew himself up. A police officer at the scene said the death of 5 people, 2 of them members of the police, were confirmed and more than 10 others were wounded. The terrorist group claimed responsibility for the attack in a statement. Plans for vaccination programs began taking shape in Europe and the United States following recent breakthroughs, but surging coronavirus caseloads prompted grueling new restrictions, with Australia taking the unpopular step of closing schools and shops. Global hopes of beating the pandemic were high after U.S. biotech firm Moderna said its vaccine candidate was nearly 95% effective in a trial, a week after similar results announced by pharma giant Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech. Meanwhile, Russia is pushing ahead with the development of two vaccine candidates, and President Vladimir Putin urged fellow members of the BRICS alliance of major emerging countries to mass produce them. The state of South Australia on Wednesday announced a 6-day circuit breaker lockdown from midnight as authorities raced to contain a sudden coronavirus cluster in the city of Adelaide. Schools, restaurants, and factories were told to close, while stay-at-home orders were issued for residents across the state after a cluster of 22 cases began in a hotel used to quarantine travelers from overseas. Authorities said the hard lockdown was critical to avoid seeing a similar outbreak to Victoria's second wave. With over 200,000 people crammed at evacuation centers across the island of Luzon after the onslaught of Typhoon Vamco, the government on Wednesday said it would start testing the evacuees to prevent a surge in COVID-19 cases. Based on the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council's data, a total of 727,738 families have been affected by Typhoon Vamco, with 73 dead, 24 injured, and 19 missing as of Tuesday. Nearly 71,000 families are currently seeking shelter at 2,205 evacuation centers. The U.S. issued an emergency use authorization for the first self-administered rapid coronavirus test Tuesday as more parts of the country increased restrictions in an attempt to halt a COVID-19 surge. The Food and Drug Administration approved a testing kit for people aged 14 and older whom a doctor suspects to have COVID-19. The test, which is by prescription only, delivers results in 30 minutes. As of Wednesday, according to Johns Hopkins University, the U.S. had recorded 11,340,563 coronavirus cases with 248,429 deaths. Both totals are by far the worst in the world. Unleashing torrential floods even as it weakened, Storm Luta charged through Central America on Wednesday, causing swollen rivers to burst their banks, flipping roofs onto streets and killing at least 9 people across the region. The strongest storm on record to reach Nicaragua, Luta struck the coast late on Monday, bringing winds to nearly 249 km and flooding villages still reeling from the impact of Hurricane Eta 2 weeks ago. Luta was drenching already saturated towns and villages as it moved inland over southern Honduras, and as authorities reported many people missing, with some of the worst hit areas still cut off. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia hosts the G20 summit next Saturday in a first for an Arab nation, but the scaled-down virtual format could limit debate on a resurgent coronavirus pandemic and crippling economic crisis. The two-day meeting of the world's wealthiest nations follows a better U.S. election disputed by President Donald Trump and comes amid criticism over what campaigners call the group's inadequate response to the worst recession in decades. Held under the shadow of a raging pandemic, the summit, which is usually an opportunity for one-on-one engagements between world leaders, is reduced to brief online sessions on pressing global issues from climate change to growing inequality. Britain will ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and vans from 2030, 5 years earlier than previously planned, as part of what Prime Minister Boris Johnson is casting as a green revolution to cut emissions to net zero by 2050. Premier Johnson, who is grappling with Europe's most deadly COVID-19 crisis, Brexit trade negotiations, and the departure of his most senior advisor, wants to underscore his green credentials as part of what he hopes will be reset for his government. Britain last year became the first G7 country to set in a law a net zero emission target by 2050, which will require wholesale changes in the way Britons travel, use energy, and eat.